Are we live?
We should be. All right, guys. Here we are. Here we are. The exciting time of Sliced is back. Woohoo! Yeah. I know y'all have got to be as excited as I am. My name is JC, and I am with Asylum Life, and this is
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm with Filament Stories.
welcome, Courtney.
Hi,
Good to see you.
it's good to
Hey,
see you.
so
I'm
Sliced is where we talk about filament and 3D printing. And tonight is like a heavy filament night. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We have a special guest coming in. But first things first, the most important stuff. What did you bring to drink?
Oh, what did I bring to drink? Well, I brought two things. One,
Okay.
so that I could be hydrated, I have this really huge thing, and apparently it is a Stanley cup.
Okay. Looks
Okay,
like it.
now,
It says
now I had a
Stanley.
friend that I had a girls' weekend, and she brought them and gave them to us, and we had no idea what they were, but apparently they're like the in thing. And
Right.
so when I came home, my son was like, "Oh my gosh, mom, you have a Stanley cup?" And I was like, "Yeah." Anyway, it actually works really nicely, and I drink my water out of it. But I also
Awesome.
have flying embers,
Oh,
hard
that's a
kombucha. It's hard kombucha,
hard kombucha. Ooh,
right?
nice.
I've
I
never
love
had it.
kombucha.
We're gonna try
That
it.
would
I
be
do
pretty
too.
awesome.
This is hard kombucha.
I thought
Sounds
by nature kombucha was hard anyway.
yeah.
It just had to be stopped before, but you know,
So what do you
you got
have to
well.
drink?
So I'm bringing out the good stuff this evening, and actually, this is just Four Roses. If you know anything about whiskey,
Yes,
scotch, or any of that, Four Roses.
Four
It's not the
Roses.
most expensive one, but for the price, it's some good stuff. So
It's good
that's what I'll be
stuff.
working on this evening. Yeah, I think so. I think
You'll
so.
be working
So, what
on it. I
projects are you
like it.
working on, Courtney?
Huh?
You got any fun projects going on?
I have a lot of projects going on because it's
Okay.
nearly ERRF time, and as you know, I love ERRF. I love ERRF. I love any of the rep festivals or anytime we can get together and see people that we know and we've met before, people we've not met before, but are now going to become our friends. That at the end of the weekend we're really sad to part. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm working on lots
Right.
of things. I'm making my little filament stories sample spools.
Awesome.
I'm making
Awesome. Well,
hundreds
hey,
of
Peter
them.
Iggy. Welcome in,
Huh?
Peter.
Hey,
I was
Peter.
just saying, Peter just popped in. We know, you know something really cool. You know what this weekend signifies? It's been a year since we met in person. Well, Earth.
Was that
We
the
had
first
been
time we met?
we had been Discord buddies like
I didn't
for
realize
a
for
while.
some reason I thought we'd met before
Yeah.
then.
No. And so
Wow.
I know, isn't that crazy? It's
It
crazy to
seems
think what a
like
year has brought.
we met a long time before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so, yeah, it's been really fun. I do love Earth. I'm just like you, Courtney, as far as I like meeting the people, people that you've been on Discord, people on TikTok, and especially since like my TikTok audience has grown a little more than I don't even know if I was doing TikTok at first when I at last Earth, and so it's just been kind of fun just to meet people, and I'm excited to meet some more people, and we're going to be hanging out with some awesome people. This time we're going to be Clock Spring,
Noticement.
Photosmith, Charo, Creatrix Brit. We're going to have a good group there,
And
just
that
kind of hanging.
Asylum Life guy.
And that Asylum Life guy, whoever he
Actually,
is.
I think, you know what? I think we're really lucky. I think Akuma Mods is going to,
Yes.
yeah, he's going to come hang out with us a little bit. But even more so than that, like it's a little embarrassing because, hold on, Windows security is saying something. Is somebody hacking the stream? It just popped
Nah.
up. So, yeah, even more than that, we are really lucky that we are connected in such a way that we have. I said a word. We wanted to have a lounge, and the ERRF people who were coordinating was like, and they went over to the 3D Gloop guys and said, "You're the sponsor that has the lounge." And there is another group of people that said they want to have a lounge, but that's you. You know, you have sponsored that thing, and
Right.
they said, "Well, who is it?" and they said it's Filament Stories and Andrew of 3D Glue. And when you say Andrew, you've got it covered because the two main people there are Andrew and Andrew. He said, "Oh, I know them. I'll call them." So he called me and he was like, "Hey, you want to combine lounges?" And we were like, "Yeah." And so it ended up that we are like right at the entrance, right? Right there at the entrance. And our booths are connected. But what I think is the embarrassing part is, like you said, we've got all of us. It's a gaggle of us that's
Yes.
combined, except
Gaggle.
for the
Okay.
only logo that is showing is mine. And it looks like Filament Stores is like
Filament Story.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yes, I know, I know. Well, yeah, it looks
So,
like Eric is coming to his first ERRF. He's saying that in
oh,
the chat room. But you know what? While we're talking about meeting people and everything, I think there's somebody we ought to bring in that we met at ERRF last year as well, and that
okay.
is Mitch
Should we bring him
from
in?
Polar Filaments. Bring him in. This is our special guest tonight, guys. Come on in, Mitch.
Howdy.
Woo! Hold on, clap.
I
There we
did
go.
not know.
Yay!
I didn't know you guys both met at ERRF, so that means that I've known you equally long as well.
It has been exactly a year
Yeah.
since we met Mitch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you came by the booth, and the reason that I remembered you, because I didn't know who you were at the time, and you just came by and you were asking.
I didn't know
like,
you.
there were like 3 really good questions, and yours was one of them. You were the first person to ever ask about, like, when we were talking about recycled, you're like, what kind of recycled? Is it post-consumer or post-industrial? So like you were the first person to ask anything like that. Usually people
Okay.
just like, oh, that's cool, and then they just walk away. So got me out of the
awesome.
routine.
Wow.
Well, so
Yeah,
Mitch,
I
have you
remember
done?
seeing you. And
Go ahead.
go ahead. Say again.
I was just going to ask Mitch. I mean, like, so we met him there. Have you done ERFs previously? What are there other festivals that you had done prior to that event? What kind of give us a little history on your Rep Rap Festival career?
Yeah, so that was the first ERRF that I had gone to. Just before that, in the summer, was MRF in Goshen, Indiana. That was my first ever like going to an event. So it was an intern that we had convinced me to go, and he's like, just load up whatever you can in the car and just like show up. I had no plan or anything like that. So ERRF was kind of round 2 for that. I was like, okay, this stuff is cool. I understand who's going to be there, what's going to be like. So it was a little bit more planned and stuff like that. That was actually where we got our first t-shirts, these t-shirts, for the first time, because we were like finally opening the doors to the public. But prior to that, we were kind of closed in. Everything was business to business. We didn't have like a consumer facing side of anything. So I didn't need to reach out. I didn't need to go to events like that. So it's been a little over a year now going to more of like the hobbyist, and I like to say fun events, because people do interesting looking prints and not just like automotive brackets or gizmos or whatnot that don't mean as much.
Okay. So what
So
do you get?
you are in automotive. There's a lot of like we're in technology here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but you have a lot of automotive industry around you.
Yeah, so I'm just outside of Detroit. We're in Troy, Michigan. So everybody around me is all just like automotive, whatever. There's like the people next door make mud flaps for cars. People just down the road do end of line testing, and like we're across the street from like Mahle and Bosch and all that kind of stuff. So everything here is like car central. So that's our inspiration, or at least our origin.
That's awesome.
So
What brought you over into the consumer side of things then?
Just seeing people on YouTube. I met Joel, 3D printing nerd, when he came to Michigan once, and he came to Flint and had no idea what to expect. It was a pretty small meetup, but it was, I don't know, it was like my first, like, I was just like fanning over him because I was like, wow, he's a celebrity. And I was like explaining to my friends and stuff like that. And they're like, who? And it was like 3D printing, like the king of 3D printing. So like that was the first like experience of actually seeing something in the hobbyist 3D printing world instead of just like somebody on YouTube. So it was kind of like, that was probably the origin moment of like, hey, I want to start getting more involved, because that was a lot of fun. But I didn't have anything to show at that point. So I was just kind of like an attendee. I was just like going to show up and kind of like say I got my participation award, but that was about it.
Okay. Awesome. And Courtney, you had something you were going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing the dog thing where you look.
It's all good. Well,
Okay,
so what do you get out of ERRF, Mitch?
No,
I'm
wait,
sorry.
hold on. Can we do this? We introduced our beverage. Do you have a beverage, Mitch?
Oh.
This is what I'm going to work through during this stream.
Ooh. He's got 3 of them. That's awesome. That's what I'm talking about.
Opening the
That's
next one
fantastic.
prematurely.
I'm so glad you're thirsty. Okay, so Asylum, you had another question, and then Peter had a question, and so do your question, and then I'm going to answer Peter's question.
Okay. So so when it comes to ERRF, what do you get out of it when these rep rat festivals and everything? Now I know you're not coming to this one coming up, but I know you enjoy them, and I see you there at every one of them when I go. What do you get? What does that mean to you? What does the rep rat festival do?
All right. So I've got a lot of sides to it because, like, yeah, I got the business side, which is like staying at the booth saying, hey, did you know that we exist? Here's what we are. We usually sell filament and stuff like that as well to kind of get it out to people. It's really cool to be able to talk to people as well because you don't get your average 3D printer that shows up there. You see the people that like their whole life is 3D printing. They have the coolest projects. I usually say that like when you go to these conventions, on like YouTube or online, you see the things that needed to be invented, but every convention you see the things that someone wanted to invent, even if it didn't need to be. And it's just like like sometimes it's just a big experiment. They're like, maybe this is a waste of time, but I spent a year of my life making this one weird project and it's very niche and it doesn't have an impact, but it's like super, super cool. And some of those end up turning into companies, or some of them inspire other people to do different projects. And this is really like ground zero of kind of like innovation when it comes to the 3D printing world.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
you know what? That is such an interesting way to explain it. Because there's another Mitch, and he is the backpack printing guy, right? Now,
Yeah.
is there a need in the world for 3D printers that sit on our back?
Yeah, you do it because you
Maybe,
can, not because you need to.
and I just thought, he got a Delta printer and sort of stuck it on his back. But I'm on a call that has some other makers on it, and there's some really smart people on that call. And he started talking about what he was doing, and that is not a minor project. In order to be able to get that to function, that is a lot of work he put into it. And he was talking about, the next one and whatnot. And I was just sitting here and thinking, but he loves it. If you hear water, it's because I'm in my basement mechanical room and someone flushed the toilet. Okay, Peter had a question. He said, what's on your shirt? So I'm going to stand up and show you all my shirt and see if you can. Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
There we
Can you
go.
read it?
I've got 99 problems and the filament ain't one.
And it's in the shape of a skull, but the filament ain't one.
Yeah.
You remember the song?
I know the song.
And it is
awesome.
Round. I'm deforming it a little. I'm not that endowed, but I am deforming it a little. I have at ERRF, there will be buttons, and they will be less deformed. So do I have buttons? So I have gone overboard with ERRF crap. I mean, overboard. In fact, my husband said, "Oh, Richard and Alice are coming to stay on Monday night for the night. You have stuff too. What is that?
Keep
food,
going.
or
I'll
you
unwrap it as you talk.
That's a sticker mule container.
Sticker mule. It came in yesterday.
What is it?
It's more of my nice shiny,
it's your chicken.
glittery chicken.
Oh, everyone loves the chicken.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about it. And I built a whole, you've seen it, but I've got a whole sticker station.
A sticker station.
Built out of Gridfinity.
Peter, I love your answer. I've got 99 filaments, but I need 101.
That's
and
a
it
good one.
rhymes.
Like one.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I love that. I have more
So
than
you were
99.
talking buttons.
So wait, talk about your sticker station really quickly. We have to go off. I know I'm supposed to keep us on topic, but
I know. Anyway, so I'm a big Gridfinity fan. All right, and so but Gridfinity, if you know Zach, what's his last name? I can't remember. But
I know.
So it has these grids on the bottom, and I always say his last name wrong. Well, each of these have a grid that they fit on, like this. And so I could spread them out on my table and it keeps everything in place, you know, and if I put them across grids, it holds everything together so I can move it and it doesn't shift. And last time we were trying to put stickers in bowls and things were sliding all over the place, and stickers were, you know, some people, you know how you don't like your food touching? Sometimes the
Yes.
stickers were touching. And so I solved the problem this time. I'm excited about it.
I
come and
am
get stickers
currently
at ERRF.
working on. I'm trying to find our question list so that I don't get in trouble and
I've
not
got it.
ask.
No, you're good.
You
I
have
know
it?
the next question because our next
Okay.
stuff is
Well,
going into his company.
Wait, what? What's the question?
Asking him more about his business.
Mitch, can you tell us more? Okay. So let's do this. So I know that when I saw you at ERRF, and I had a friend, and actually I'm going to get to see him. He will be nameless at this point, but he was teasing me because I was finding filament companies and I was bookmarking them. And I was like, I found like 15 more. It's amazing. There's so many filament companies out. And this was a number of years ago. And he said, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, and it was treasure hunting, right? Who knows, there would be an amazing filament and I would then have to buy it because this was way before Filament Stories. And so that was the beginning of what is now. If you've been to our website, we have a filament company database, which, by the way, we're trying really hard on that to not have junk in there, but to have real, you know, but there's, anyway, so I'm working on that. And so when I saw you guys last year, I was like, I do not know of Polar Filament. So of course I went and looked you all up and I was like, oh, look at this. And you had all of your colors and everything that you had out. And then I went over and said hi. And apparently I asked you the question, but yeah, tell us about how you got started and
Yeah.
all the good stuff.
So the reason that we got started was all industrial. So we started as a print farm. I'm sure everyone who's got probably a handful of printers has probably thought at one point, what if I make my own filament? I get a lot of people that email me and they're like getting like desktop filament extruders and they're like, how do I get into this? And can I get materials from you or something like that? So of course that came across my mind as well. And I was like, all right, let's just start with something small. We were calculating what we were using in terms of filament and then kind of realizing the scale needed to make it work. So it turned into like from a desktop extruder to like one that will take up an entire table. And we're like, okay, so that would be good. It makes this many per hour. And then we started looking into quality and it's like, oh, if you want to hold quality, you got to get something that's the size of a room. And then we're like, okay, well, if we're going to get something that's the size of a room, we should be able to do kind of like different variations, different size spools, different like lengths, and hold really good tolerances. And the next thing that we know, it was like originally a discussion that was maybe a machine that would have been, I don't know, probably 5 feet long. And the one that we have next door is about 75 feet long.
I was going to say 5 feet is how can you make one spool an hour at 5 feet?
I don't know the actual, it goes very quickly from like spools per hour, or sorry, hours per spool to spools per hour, depending on the size that you grow.
Yeah.
But we were able to justify it with just our own volume. With how much we were going through, it was pretty easy to figure out like what we were buying from other companies at the time. But even that, the cost alone was not the reason to do it, because the problem that we had was supply chain. And this was pre-COVID. It was like 2019. So it was before everything kind of started shutting down. And then COVID was like the nail in the coffin for trying to source anything else. Cause it was in the automotive world, we usually get like a couple days heads up. They'll be like, hey, we need 500 parts in 4 days. So like, if it takes 2 days, even if you're ordering something from Amazon for filament to show up, that would leave us 2 days to print hundreds of parts. And then when that 2-day shipping turned into like 1 week or 1 month shipping, it just fell apart. So that was kind of the kick in the butt that we needed. We started kind of getting our own equipment. And then we just made it for ourselves for a little while, just kind of like learning how it worked, found the ups and the downs. We had the disasters. But then there's myself. I have an engineering background. I'm a software engineer, but then we have mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. Everyone started taking their part of the machine, ripping it apart, improving it to kind of like customize it for what we had. And then after we kind of had it down, we're like, all right, we're using our own filament. We were producing it pretty quick. It takes about 2 minutes to make a spool. You can make a lot of filament in 1 day. And we were just running the line for 1 day a week. And we're like, what happens if we run it 3 days a week or 4 days?
So if you were in it 1 day a week and you were able to move that much product.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't
You can
take
sell
very
that.
long.
Yeah. And were you selling mostly to companies versus individuals
We didn't
at
sell to
that point?
anybody. We just used it ourselves. That was the only
Oh, you
reason.
were using. So
Yep.
were you
Oh, wow.
scaling the print farm with the production of filament?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, we were just taking it in stride for whatever it
Wow.
was. Another big thing is that we had some like really weird niche filaments that we were using at the time that like sometimes you could get and sometimes you couldn't. So it was like more than just PLA. It was more like getting into the softer materials. So we needed like kind of a reliable way to do something because some of our projects that we were doing, we were agreeing to support for 5 years or something like that. And we're like, okay, that's cool. But if this one really random place that we find disappears in 5 years, we're still on the hook for this no matter what it costs. So that was kind of like an insurance policy as well. But yeah, no, we didn't sell it all. We were just using it entirely on our own. That justified it. So at that point, we had like a no risk open. So we're like, well, open the doors to the public. We can make like a website and just say, hey, it exists. And if somebody buys it, it's a bonus. And if it didn't really matter. So it was like really low stress.
My son has come to say hello.
I just
No,
had
I was going to say
alcohol
there's a
to
Smurf
put in
behind
the
you.
pasta.
Pecan.
I,
This
Yeah,
is
probably.
Grayson, my son. Hold on, there's Mitch.
I already
What's
met
up?
him.
Yeah, we
No,
saw
no,
him
you
earlier.
know JC.
I
Yes,
met
will.
him. I met
You met
Mitch.
Mitch?
He was helping with mic checks.
Huh?
He was helping with mic checks and getting the
Oh,
stream set up.
he met you here. Okay.
Yeah, earlier. Yeah.
For a little bit.
No, okay, but I'm hearing an important story from Mitch.
Among Us.
Oh, my.
Oh, thank you. Okay. It is lovely to see you and your soda all over me. Okay. Thank you, son. He
Well,
said
awesome.
he just had alcohol, and I was like, what? Because Chris uses some red wine when he's making the pasta sauce. Clearly he's drunk.
Mm.
Okay. Okay, yes. So, he's that age. Okay, so this is such an interesting story because a lot of, like you said, a lot of people have said, I would love to make my own filament. A lot of people have said that. I've never said that, not once, because that to me would be very sad because it's like the Pokemon. I'm like the Pokemon of filament. I want to collect them all. In fact, we've got a question here from 3D Printing Geek. Hello. And the question is, what is your favorite PLA filament brand? And it's very hard to say that. I've had questions on like TikTok, which is frustrating because when I reply on TikTok, I usually have to get 4 replies in to get them all listed because there are a lot of really good filament brands. And Mitch is here, so obviously it's Polar Filament, right? Clearly. The filament brand that was to me, and at the time, I didn't know, I was early on, right, in 3D printing, but Protopasta was this filament I had heard about, and it was just, it to me was the pinnacle of specialized filament. And there are certainly filaments that are really good out there, but Protopasta was really interesting. And so I got some Protopasta. It prints well. These days, if I had been doing this 8 years ago, I would have an entirely different job. I would be like, and that's crap, and that's crap. Don't buy this, right? These days, there are very few filaments that I get that I have a real difficulty printing, right? So it's more preference. And Protopasta is interesting because they don't, I think just from a history of time, from when I've got my first 3D printer to today, Protopasta has been the brand that has been my favorite for the longest time, if that makes sense. I've liked them, but then I'll go through phases. Like for instance, where's your orange? Oh my gosh, I love this color. It's connected to a printer, but I'm just gonna bring it.
We're showing off filament now.
Bring it. Yeah, here we go. This is your flame orange, right?
Yeah, I think we renamed it. I forgot what we renamed
this
it
looks
to.
terrible on my screen. This looks like this does not look like what it looks like. This to me looks like a nice pumpkin orange. Does it look like that to you guys?
No.
I mean, for
No, I
anyone
didn't
that's like
believe-
looking, it's based off of like safety vests. So like how when you see
Yes.
a safety vest and the
Yeah.
product, it's like for some reason it's just like way more vibrant. It's using the same technique as that. So
Everything's good. My husband said, "Did you call me?" I said, "No." And then I said to you guys, "Yes, Mitch." When you were saying safety vest, and he said, Yeah, yes. Did you? I was like, yeah. But yeah, I love that color. The new. What's the name? Did you decide a name on that pink?
Yeah, it was from your YouTube video. I have to finish making a batch of it now. So
Okay.
whenever I get colors, we always start with like a sample amount. So I did a sample, I released all of those, and then they take many weeks, like 14 or 15 weeks to get the production supplies in. So
Okay.
whoever left that comment, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but as soon as we do run that batch of
Next run. Yeah.
the next, yep, then I think it was like atomic watermelon or electric watermelon.
Oh, it's on. Yeah.
So
Atomic
as soon as we do get that first roll, that number one roll, serial number 001 of that color, will be going to the person in the comments that came up with the name.
That's
Awesome.
great. That's really
Awesome,
that's
awesome.
great. Yeah. So I think I have to say Protopasta just because they have had this place, and then they had. I love great names like Blood of My Enemies. I mean, but other companies have good names. I have bought a filament just on a name. So the burnt titanium, which has been burnt titanium, has, and it's the master batch that is what's making that color. So a lot of companies have had that, but that I keep looking over here because something is going on.
Yeah.
But I go and investigate and it looks fine, and then it makes a creaking noise again, and I'm like, oh. The printers
Time to
are that way.
grease your
Huh?
bearings. Time to grease the
again.
bearings.
Yeah, I think I actually I know what it is. I have a little. It's a carbon fiber, and it's dragging
yeah,
along something.
that's always scary. Sometimes
I have
I've
a
broken printers with that
guide.
stuff.
Yeah, because I have the spool in an odd spot, so I have a little PLA printed guide, and it runs through that guide. And so as it's going through this spot, it's chewing into it.
Yeah.
But I
So
can
anyway,
print another one. Okay, JC.
So like you were saying, it's really a preference. I mean, now, as far as a favorite, it just depends on what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
love Mitch's glow in the dark stuff, like all of that stuff that, or the fluorescent reactive stuff or UV light is really, really good stuff. There's lots of different things out there. So just explore and look and try lots of different filaments. And I'm sure, and we may talk about at the end of the show, Mitch is probably experimenting on a lot of other filament that he's about to come out with. And so I don't know if we can get any secrets, but stick around. We might be able to.
Yeah. And thank you guys for asking questions. We had a little thing that happened, and without going into all the details, we had this scheduled, and then we had to cancel the scheduled one and then reschedule it. Except for my husband, who is really good. He's the technical guy for doing stuff like that. He actually forgot to schedule it. Right? He did you so is that correct?
Not really sure what happened. It just didn't get scheduled somehow.
It didn't get, so the original one was scheduled, but I completely rely on pop-ups. And I'll go, oh, Mitch is releasing that new filament. I gotta go find that.
Brian, how are you doing? Good to see you coming in.
Brian Vines, BB3D. Hey, Brian. Yep. It's always great to see Brian. Brian. Oh, okay. Brian is known for having great shirts, right? I just love it. A new video comes out and he's going to have a new shirt. So I wanted to have a shirt because one of the things about when you go to these rep festivals, I mean, I'm a lady and I like to, have some style, but for 3 days, you're going to wear a shirt that says Filament Stories, right? Or Asylum Life or Polar Filaments, right? And so it makes it makes your outfit very easy, but at the same time, anyway, so I have this shirt and I'm going to stand up and show it. And so some of you get it? It's a circle, right? So let me hold, I've got hair. Okay. I don't know if you can see it. It's supposed to be a spool. I've got 99 problems, but the filament ain't one. If you remember that. So it's supposed to, and it actually is in the Filament Stories like hues. Anyway, and so it just came in the mail and I'm really excited about it. And I didn't know if anybody would get it, but because it was my idea. And then I decided I didn't care if anybody got it. I liked it too much.
Yeah, that's important. So, all right, guys, for everybody who's coming in, we are just sitting here. We're talking about the filament tonight. Tonight is a big filament night just because we have our friend Mitch from Polar Filaments. We've gone through and talked about ERRF that's coming up. We're all definitely excited about that. Just kind of getting together with all of our friends, meeting new people that we get to talk to online. And now we've talked about his company, but I think Courtney really wants to get down into the weeds of a couple things, because y'all know Courtney. She loves filament. She studies it all the time. And I'm seeing on our list words like NatureWorks 4043D and Carbon LX17. So I'm going to back off and I'm going to let you guys handle this next section, because this is stuff I know nothing about, but I'm interested in hearing about it. So go.
Okay, so go. So I'll start with a little bit, and that is that as consume well, and Mitch, I think depending on how much time, and we're going to hold this to an hour, because Asylum and I have we could just be like, oh, it's 3 hours. How did that happen? And so but then I think we want to try
do this for 3 hours.
3 hours. So when you get your filament, and you may have heard of things, we're going to go PLA only. Let's just talk about PLA specifically, because that's what that thing is. And NatureWorks is a word that you used in there. And so we talk about PLA and that it's corn-based, and that in a spool, the majority of what we have that we're printing is that PLA corn-based. Resin is a weird word, right? Because the word that you use for the little, you have that bag still, Mitch? You had a bag.
I've got a lot of bags on the other side.
Got a lot of bags. Okay. But yeah, and they come, if you're a filament manufacturer or producer, you order from a company the base resin, which is PLA in these little pellets, little tiny balls. And then you do your thing, adding things to it, and out comes orange or sparkly green or what have you. And you may do other things to it to make it be something like a PLA plus or a silk PLA or a matte PLA. So you do all kinds of things to it, but the base that you start with, the base resin, is what's in that question that you have there, JC. Am I explaining this correctly, Mitch? Have I gone off? Yeah. So the question, So let's see, because I said, what's the difference between NatureWorks and it's not
Corbion is the other one.
Corbion. Yeah, I spelled it wrong. Corbion. Okay, Corbion. Yeah. So do you want to take the NatureWorks versus Corbion?
Sure. Yeah, I can go over that. So
did I introduce that in such a way that I messed you up for answer? Like, did I make it complicated for you to answer it?
I could talk about the two for a long time. So you're gonna have to cut me off when you're getting bored of me saying the same thing. So in the world of plastics, one of the weird things is that filament production is very, very small compared to everything else. So another good example of something that actually uses PLA is a lot of like takeout containers or biodegradable forks and stuff like that. So when people are making those, they're buying a lot of plastic at once, and they're just mass producing just plastic parts. 3D printing is a very small subset. There's very few people percentage-wise in the country that like own a 3D printer, and then those are the only people that are actually buying PLA. So much so that it's so rare that whenever I talk to plastic suppliers, there's a lot of like distributors and stuff that like they'll generally kind of be the middleman between the actual factory that's pumping it out just nonstop and like actually sending it out to orders. Sometimes they don't even know what PLA is. They're like, oh, let me just write that down. I'll check if we have that. And I'm like, this is like the base of 3D printing. Like, it's never a good sign when somebody just says, I'll look into it to see if we have that. But PLA is a very uncommon plastic, whereas something like ABS, which is usually like after you graduate from PLA, you might move into ABS as well. ABS is used everywhere. So if you say ABS to anybody in the plastics world, they know exactly what it is. So because of that, though, there are tons of manufacturers of things like ABS. There are very few manufacturers of PLA. And two of the most known manufacturers are NatureWorks and Corbion. NatureWorks makes some PLA in the US. I don't know if Corbion makes any in the US, but I believe they're headquartered in France.
I was going to say, but NatureWorks headquarters is in the US, and the US makes a lot of corn, grows a lot of corn, right?
Yep.
And yes. NatureWorks is the one, if you've heard anything about the back end of what it's coming. You've probably heard Nature Works. These numbers, the I don't even remember them. The
4043.
4043D, right? And those are different, and they're multiple formulations, right? Of so I said, PLA, but then it's what, which PLA,
Yeah.
right? And so but NatureWorks is the one you've heard of. Oh, you have a question, Asylum?
When you finish yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah, and then Corbion is one that is, I have not heard of that one mentioned very much. So
yeah, there's a lot of brands out there. So like people have started listing, like if you just go on to any other filament supplier's website, sometimes in the description deep down you'll see like which pellet they make it with, because a lot of people ask. It became popular maybe like 2 or 3 years ago that people started caring about where it came from. I don't know why, but like it became a very pivotal thing. They're like, oh, I want to make sure it's made from this specific thing. And that actually was the reason for one of my experiments. Was you can buy, as you know, if you buy a PLA from one manufacturer or a different manufacturer, being the filament company, you can get very different results. You can have ones that print 10 degrees hotter, 10 degrees colder, 20 degrees hotter, 20 degrees colder. Some string, some don't. Some have a matte finish. And like, even if you try to get regular PLA, like a roll of black normal PLA from one company and black normal PLA from another company, they might just print different. So at the time, there was a lot of people that were saying, oh, maybe it's the base resin that's used. Maybe it's that NatureWorks versus Corbion. And there's not really a good way to answer that, because if you get PLA from one company that uses one resin and PLA from another one, you're not just evaluating the two base resins, you're kind of evaluating their manufacturing process. So I got the chance to buy a lot of NatureWorks resin and a lot of Corbion resin and basically make it myself the exact same way with the exact same process, the exact same ingredients. So that way I could see what effect the actual base resin had in the filament without any other factors in it.
So you use the scientific method, and I know JC Asylum. Sorry, I know now after we met a year ago, and I call you JC and Asylum. It goes back and forth. But yeah, you eliminated all of the variables down to Corbion and NatureWorks, which is what those two names. Okay, so we're gonna put a pin in that for a second because your arm is getting tired being held up.
I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna kind of dumb this down for me and make sure I understand what's happening here. So we're saying resin, but now in 3D printing world, most of the time we think resin, we're thinking liquid. So the resin that you're talking about is a solid. Good. He's going to go get a sample, and then I have one more question on that. Hey guys, come on in. For everybody who is just stepping in right now, we're talking with Mitch from Fuller Filaments. Courtney and them have run off to go get some things. I'm learning a lot about filament tonight. I've got some questions, definitely just about kind of the production of filament. And if you want to know things about filament, Mitch is the guy to talk to. He's very scientific in his approach. He really works hard to make sure that he's doing the best and finds the best way to do the things that he does. So I definitely advise that you look at his filament. It's a really nice filament. He has some great UV responsive stuff. It's really cool. So we're going to talk resin. So resin, a lot of people think of liquid resin for, MSLA printing. Well, this resin is solid. I want to make sure I'm understanding that. So here's some, and I think Mitch is going to come back with some.
Yeah. So this is, I beat you. Ha ha ha.
He has a bigger warehouse than you do.
This without. Can you see
there
the
we
little
go.
pellet?
So that reminds me of like beans from an old beanbag chair or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it almost the silicone-y kind of. Okay, so it's a solid resin. Now here's my next question. So just kind of as a layman, to me, you're sitting in there and you are creating your PLA. But what you're saying is that you're buying a base PLA and you're adding things to that already base PLA to create what you're doing.
Exactly. And actually we have like our natural color that's listed on our website is literally just this stuff melted down. There's nothing else in it. That natural is as basic as it comes. You get that, like, you can see that it's not perfectly clear. This is the specific resin that we're using. It's like a yellowy tinge. It's got almost like a sweet smell to it, actually. But that is, yeah, I mean, what you're holding looks like a spool of natural PLA. Uh-oh.
We
Did
can't
lose
hear you,
audio?
Courtney. Your mic is off. Can't hear you. So Courtney is having some technical difficulties. I would probably suggest that you check and see if you've muted your mic or
I
potentially.
did because
There we
I
go.
was making crumpling noises. Yeah. Can you hear me
Okay.
now? Yeah, I did
Yes.
mute it. So yeah, this is an example of taking those pellets, which in that form, it's called resin. It's really a form, right? It's the shape. In that shape, it's called resin. So that comes from the manufacturer. You can buy it in a small bag all the way up to, can you get it bigger than a Gaylord? Is there something bigger than that?
Yeah, rail cars is the next.
Rail
Well, I
cars?
mean, you
Okay.
get rail cars, you got super sacks. They have all these different names for them. There's not like a standard size, really. Depends
A
on who you're
Gaylord is a great big bag, and it has a fancy
Gaylord.
name that sounds like it, you know, it's like Mike, John, Steve Gaylord. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I like that one. But that is a really big bag that you would need you need something powered to lift it.
Yeah, it's perfectly sized as a pallet. So it's 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet cubed. And they usually it always depends on the plastic. I want to say, I'm reaching out of my expertise. I'm pretty sure a Gaylord is a volume size. So a Gaylord of PLA weighs about 750 kilograms. Because I think we get Gaylords of ABS as well. And ABS is lighter, I think. So it's like it comes out to less than 750 kilograms per Gaylord. And then super sacks are like 2 Gaylords.
So I'm just going to take a wild guess here. So 750 kilograms, you're not going to get 750 kilograms of this because there will be some waste starting and stopping the line, but you're also then going to add in the additional things like the master batch, which is going to make it red, for instance, or sparkles or whatever. So whatever is added in to make that, and this, we're kind of sidetracked, but this is highly pigmented. You need a very small amount of this. If you've ever seen filament being made, you'll see a container of the cream. Yeah, that. And that's going to be, and that'll come out very strongly colored.
Yeah, that's 5% too. This is a cup that we had to set aside. That's 5%. Sometimes we run as small as 0.5%, which is out of every little orange and blue speckle that you see in there, remove 9 out of 10 of those. So you'd only be able to see like 1 or 2 specks in there. Very, very highly concentrated.
Okay, so I was just dumbing that down just to make sure. So we have a PLA base. You had the master batch, which was the color, texture, glitter, whatever that you add to that to blend it. So I'm good. I'm going to give you all 3 more minutes on this topic, and I'm backing out.
Cool.
Okay, so let's see. We'll go back and say. So the question was making PLA as a base, and I love the fact. Mitch, you're going to have to come back at least 7 more times because for me, because I haven't paid attention to the questions. I'm so sorry, guys. Asylum, make sure that I'm not missing questions. But
you're good.
Yeah, so from that, there was you eliminated everything but one variable, and that was Corbion and NatureWorks. And then you did tests. So which one sucks and which one is amazing?
Yeah, so the tests also happen while we're making it because I have a ton of sensors hooked up. So pretty much every spool that we make, I'm measuring things like pressure, I'm measuring ovality, I'm measuring diameter, stuff that you're used to, but then also temperatures and elongation and a lot of things that just don't need to be measured necessarily. And a lot of the times I ignore things like that. And but whenever I'm comparing two things, I like to kind of put those side by side and see like, was something different? Was it what I was expecting? Is it not what I was expecting? So they ended up being made very, very similar to each other. They melted at the same temperatures. They extruded at the exact same rate. So when they were done, I had them spooled up on 2 different spools, and I couldn't tell the difference based on the filament alone. So the manufacturing process was basically they're the same. And then when it gets into the actual printing with it, I gave, there's a guy here that just like runs all of the 3D printers. I just gave him the 2 spools and I was like, hey, print a lot of things with it and just make sure you mark which ones came from which spool. And then I was asking him if he saw any difference. So he was testing things like temperature towers, retraction settings. He was testing strength. So we printed these like giant bars and we would measure them for strength and how much they would bow. And honestly, I really wanted them to be different. I wanted them to be more different than they were. They were pretty much identical to the point where if I had two of the same parts that were printed and I had no way to identify them, I could not tell them apart. And Courtney, I actually gave, I think
You gave me.
yes, I gave you
Yeah.
one of each of those spools. So
One
you
of each.
can do those tests. So they're
And I
identical.
was like, I'm going to do some testing. He was like, guess what? You can't tell the difference. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But no, that's, yeah. And you said you went through, by the way, hi, Bob Carnes. I saw Bob come in. So 50 spools of each you tested. So this was not a small test. That's
Yep.
a lot of prints.
Usually run batches of 50. I still have maybe 15 of them sitting of the Corbion ones because we use NatureWorks primarily here. So pretty much if you get a normal spool, it's NatureWorks. But I still have like 15 spools of the old Corbion stuff. It's just marked and it's just like Corbion or something like that. So they're still sitting out there.
So,
From a
so my
price point
sense-
in the U.S., is the Corbion more expensive because it has to be brought in?
I think Corbion works out to be a little bit cheaper, but they're comparable because like things like ABS versus PLA, ABS is very, very cheap to get the raw pellets compared to PLA is probably one of the most expensive like raw materials that I can get for extruding filaments. Because I mean, PETG is another popular one that's really cheap. ABS, TPU is expensive depending on which TPU you get, but when it comes to like different brands, comparing them, they're pennies apart. When it comes to different materials, they can be dollars apart per pound.
Okay. Well, Tom Lamo was asking about 870 resin, says it's a real high temp PLA.
Yeah, so 870, I don't know if that's Corbion because like they come up with numbers. That might be like 3D 870, which would be Ingio's version if it starts with 3D. And if it's like LX, then it would be Corbion's. There are tons of variants, and if you're interested in this, you can literally go to like Google NatureWorks 3D printing resin, and you will see. I think NatureWorks has maybe 4 or 5 different mainstream resins that you can pick from. Corbion has about like 5 or 6 different ones. Some of the differences are some are designed to be tough, some are designed to be high temperature, some of them are designed to be all sorts of things, and that is very secret in the sense that like you don't really get to see what they're adding into it. They don't tell you why because they're trying to be competitive between each other as well. So I kind of just have to take that. I get a data sheet that tells me the stuff that matters to me, and then the actual makeup of it is kind of unknown.
Okay. And then someone's asking, I think this is a Pokemon color, Charmeleon. Do you make a Pokemon color? I assume that's like is what
Are you saying chameleon or
whatever it's called?
I don't know. It could
I
be
know it's
chameleon
probably
or
chameleon. I'm just messing. I don't know.
So
You make
this
a
is
chameleon color.
where it's interesting. So this is where I come in with R&D. Is I usually come up with an idea, I get to test it, and I figure out whether or not it is possible. And then there's another guy here that is more of the business-oriented side, and he decides whether or not it's a good idea to continue pursuing long term. So one thing that's really cool with colors, going back to somebody asking like, what is your favorite filament? It sounds like to me is like saying, what's your favorite color? So you can't really say what your favorite color is because it depends. So it's like, oh, if I'm printing something for my desk, I might want something that's like a darker, more neutral color. If I'm printing something as like a frame, I might use something that's really vibrant and pops. So like some of my favorite colors for the most part are like these like really kind of like dull colors. But whenever I'm coming up with a new one, I usually try to make sure that I'm not stepping on other people's toes, because if there's 300 different like very specific niche filaments that are all exactly the same, then that doesn't really do any good if I could be putting that effort towards something that hasn't been done or isn't done popular. So that's kind of where I explore whenever it's time for a new filament. I try to do something that's unique. There's infinite colors, there's infinite combos, so I'm not going to be running out anytime soon.
And that is, you're so right. And I love what you just said there about it's very hard to say what your I hate the question, what's your favorite filament? Because it's a very hard question to answer. I can say over time some of them. And so the question earlier, what's your favorite brand? That one, I think I hedged pretty, if I'm thinking back, right? I
Mhm.
was hedging pretty heavily on that because I was saying, if you backed me in a corner and said you got to say one, I would say Protopasta. But there's so many great filament companies out there that do different things that I love. Right? There are different things about different companies that I love. There's some things about companies that I really like some of their colors, but I don't. I'm frustrated with the interaction with the company. But darn it, I like their filament, right? And then, so there are a lot of things. But you made such a good point, right? There's what's your favorite color? It depends. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the companies like Filament or what is it, filamentcolors.xyz, the filament
Yeah.
library, they're
Yeah.
awesome because like you truly get to not focus on a brand and you get to just look through and find the right color and then figure out what it is. So I do not envy their job because I've tried taking photos of filament, trying to like you were showing
Oh,
that orange spool, like it's hard. It's
I
really
know.
hard to
I know.
capture what the
Well,
actual
but
color is.
Joe, the person who does the capturing of it, is very um anal retentive has like a negative connotation, and I don't mean that. He is
No.
very focused on doing one thing and doing it really well. And I've been on a call with him before, and he just, I mean, he'll talk about how he's got this and the light and da 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 da, because getting that color accurate is extremely important to him, and that's why he's so great at that job. Right? I mean, he's
Good word,
really good
Bob.
at that job.
Meticulous. Meticulous.
Meticulous,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
particular,
The
which is
Bob
what you
word.
need. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Meticulous.
what
Yes.
shows Chip.
I
Chip
adore Joe.
Builds is asking about a Dr. Pepper colored filament. I would say, Chip,
Oh,
go over to XYZ, go over to the filament library and then look there. You might find something pretty close.
If you
Mitch.
want, I can cover what it's like to go from an idea to an actual color.
I was getting ready to say, what if
We're at the topic change anyway,
Ashley
so
Chip
y'all go.
Builds? Hi, I'm waving. I'm sorry, you're talking over here. Um, hi, Ashley. It's good to see you. So Chip Builds wants a Dr. Pepper filament. You make one, I'm buying it.
I don't know if I would be
So
able to
now
call it
let's say,
that, but
in theory, you're gonna have, and probably you can't call it Dr. Pepper because yeah.
mhm.
But let's say
Pepper
we're gonna
MD.
call
Pepper
it
MD.
right, popped or dep or never mind. You were gonna make one. What would you do? Yeah, can we hijack the fourth topic and do this, JC?
Go for it.
Okay.
Sure.
We got
Are you okay with this, Mitch?
Yeah.
about 8 minutes till we hit the hour.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to focus in. I'm going to laser focus more on what I'm most experienced with. There's a lot of ways to color filament. You can color things. I'm just going to kind of rattle off some buzzwords. There's master batches. There's like liquid colorants. There's pigments. There's a lot of ways to get a color and put it into a filament. And one of the most kind of stable approaches that I've at least found for us is master batches. And a master batch is where instead of me dealing with the actual colors and the pigments, which come as a powder, I have some pigments. I'm not going to go grab it because it will be all over me and it will be all over this room. But the pigments are just highly, very, I don't know. It feels like if you ever broke like a pen on your hand and it just gets everywhere and you can't get it off. That's what it's like every time I walk near the pigment.
Wow.
So there are companies that are really good at handling that and really good at concentrating that. So one of the things that we do is we make a master batch. We send our actual resin, so this uncolored stuff. We send that over to them. We send a lot of it, and then we send a color. And when I say send a color, I don't say I want red. They have to have a very specific red. If I wanted this red, I would mail them this cup, and they would match this color. So they have all of the different colorants, or sorry, the different pigments, the powders, and they will infuse it into this stuff. And mind you, this is kind of yellow too. So if you wanted pure white, you wouldn't just add pure white color to this. You would have to add something to offset the yellow into it. So the resin that I supply them is a huge component in how that final color comes out. So I don't know how I would send them Dr. Pepper, but I guess I could just send them a bottle of it. But when it comes to color, there's not just color. There is also how it reflects light. Something that's a matte color versus something that's highly reflective will look very different. There's also translucency, which is how much light can actually shine through it. So if I'm going to use Dr. Pepper as an example, if you hold that up to light, you're going to see some light shine through it. So you don't really want to have it be really, really highly concentrated and just have a flat color. You'd want it to be a little bit more like transparency. Transparent is something different. Transparent is more like a clarity type thing, not how much light shines through it. But all of those kind of come together in a very complicated equation to figure out exactly how to concentrate those pellets. And I actually have a new colorant that just arrived not too long ago. So when I get a sample, I usually get them in these little bags like this. And this is about 10 pounds. And this is just a new blue, and we're going to go test it out. And then when I order it in bulk, I get them in much larger quantities.
Wait, how many kilos will that potentially produce?
We can do some math. I like math.
I love math.
It depends
because
on
we were talking earlier that it needs very little.
A ballpark is 1%. So 1% to 2% is probably the most common. So if I did 1%, that means that 99% of the filament would be just PLA, and then the other 1% would be the raw material. So if I'm doing 10 pounds, I'm going to convert that into kilograms first because that's where I operate. I'm going to take 10 divided by 2.2. What was that?
I was going to say while you're doing math, I was going to say that in this master batch that comes back, it needs, so you've got these pigments and they need to be held together with something. And the thing they're held together in the case of PLA is PLA. So there's still, right, there still is a component of PLA in here. And depending on the strength you need, and I am going to go off my experience with Protopasta, and they're a little bit different in that they make their own master batches, which not as many, it is like you said, it's a lot. You're focusing on your area of expertise, and you're letting this other company, and you're saying, make it so, right? And Protopasta likes to do it themselves. So when they have a yellow, they might have a 5% yellow, a 1% yellow, a 0.5% yellow, and a 0.025. So that when they are, because if you have a really heavy pigment, if you've got 5%, meaning very strong, versus 0.25%, and you throw it in there, you guys know how it works with like certain colors, like the red is going to overpower the yellow. So that's interesting. So yeah, so how is it, are you requesting it in certain levels of strength?
No, it's just kind of whatever the lab ends up concocting. So they're just mixing, because there's a million ways to make different things. I have a list of there's a few companies that we use for colorants. Some of them will give you a list of pigments, and a list of pigments will be like, I don't know, probably 30 to 500 pigments long. So there'll be like a million different types of reds, and then you can combine different reds to make more reds, or you can take reds and yellows and combine them. And it's even more complex than just color, because some of them will fade in light, and some of them are UV resistant and will break down. Some of them are vegan. Some of them are made from like beetles and stuff like that. So it's kind of like you get to pick and choose. Some are food safe. Some of them you can like eat, and some of them you can't. It might be a harsh chemical that you don't want to use. So it's more than just finding that right shade. You got to figure out what you want to use it for. Is it going to be exposed to light? Is it food safe? All of the requirements that you do is going to make it more expensive. So you don't want to say, you don't want to kind of like too narrow focus, set those requirements. But yeah, so if you're curious, the number, so re-showing this bag right here is about 10 pounds. It's not a whole lot. That'll make about 454 spools.
Okay.
So,
which is amazing. And that will be 454 spools that from intensity of blue are similar to that you just held up. Pretty intense blue.
Yeah, it looks
like not pale blue.
I mean, this is the color swatch. So this is it diluted to 1%.
Yeah.
So
that's 1% pellet.
Yep.
Okay. That's so neat. So what if someone, and I know where JC is keeping us on time.
You're good.
Let's say
we had a question from the room.
Oh, okay. Mitch, I really like Dr. Pepper, and I want you to make me a custom filament. Is that something that you do? And I have no idea. And then how many spools would I need to order? 10,000? Yeah. What is that something? It didn't even occur to me, because I don't want to have my own filament company, but if I can ask you to.
Yes, it is possible. Some people do it. It's way easier. Instead of saying number of spools, I just say what the dollar amount is. So anytime that I have to get something like this made, I'm basically paying for a lab and their hours to kind of concoct whatever that happens to be. So it's going to be a little bit of trial and error. An average cost to get that made is probably about $750 to $1,400. So if somebody wanted a color, I would basically say, hey, you cover that. And then if you want one spool after that, I will make you one spool. But some people reach out and say that they have colors, and we white label stuff. So we'll make it, we'll slap whatever their label is, whatever their spool is on it. And that's super common with the manufacturing industry.
We have a question, and white labeling.
Yep.
That was my next question. So go with that, and then I have another question.
So,
Yeah.
What was the question?
The question, will transmission distance be something that these companies look at in the future? That's from Cool Flip.
I'm not sure what that means. What is transmission?
Transmissive?
Cool Flip, clarify that question and we'll ask it again. So y'all keep going, and when he comes back, I'm gonna give y'all about 2 more minutes.
What? Oh, okay. So that was the next question, and I know the answer, which is you have gone from a print farm, and then you said, let's make our own filament, and then you've scaled that up, and then you moved into selling your own filament. But in addition to Polar Filament, which has grown significantly in a year and a half, year and a half?
Yeah, right around a year and a half. Yeah.
Year and a half. You are also producing a significant amount of materials, filament for other companies. And that's something, and this is a bigger topic. And so hopefully you'll come back, Mitch, because every time you talk, I have more questions. I love talking to Mitch. I'm serious, because not only do you have excellent information, you explain things very well. You don't go so deep that I'm like, woo, lost. So white labeling is really common. You will hear people say, oh, every filament out there is made from like 4 main companies, right? And back in time, there were some very big companies. There still are. And they are making a lot of filament, and they are white labeling for a lot of companies. If you have a brand pop up you've never heard of Amazon, they've got 3 colors. They didn't make it, right? But there are a lot of companies, because getting the equipment to make your own filament and it's not inexpensive. You're not doing it for $500, but there are a lot of people I know. We met him at ERRF, right? Canadian Filaments. It's him.
Yep.
It's just him. And he has worked really hard, and he's got a full line and a warehouse, and he works really hard. So it's not all from 4 companies, but white labeling, you do a significant amount of white labeling for other companies. And what does white labeling mean?
Yeah, so white labeling is where we actually manufacture the filament. We extrude it, and we give you the color, and we put it on a spool. And then the brand label that you see is somebody else's brand, because they're going to resell it. And that is more what the traditional manufacturing world is. So like if you buy anything, not even filament, just any other product on Amazon, maybe you're buying, I don't know, pencils. That brand name is not usually the one making the pencils. They're the ones that are reselling it. And the reason is because I'm really good at R&D, and I'm really good at making filament. I am not a salesman. I don't want to spend all of my time dealing with Amazon shipments, returns, questions, making sure warehouses are stocked. Like that's not what I'm good at. I'm good at running the line. I'm good at inventing new colors or techniques or something. And that's usually where you hand it off to somebody else. So if you're a really big company, then you might do that as like a separate department. So you got the manufacturing department that hands it off to the marketing department. But in my case, a lot of times it's just other people that will reach out, and they'll say like, hey, I want to start my own filament brand. Can you give me these 10 different colors? Sometimes it'll be like the ones that we have. Sometimes they'll want a handful of new ones. And yeah, that's super easy. It's way easier for somebody to call and order like hundreds of spools at a time, instead of somebody calling and saying, I want 1 spool. It's way easier for me to handle, way easier to box up. I can keep track myself of everything. So like if somebody's ordering something in bulk, I know who you are. I know your name. I can remember that type of thing. I can't remember people that are ordering onesie, twosie spools online. So it's basically manufacturing is the good part. That's what I'm good at. So I'm going to keep working on the stuff that I'm good at, and I'm going to try to get better at that. And I'll leave the marketing and sales to somebody else.
That's smart. That's smart. Well, guys, we're going over. We're going to keep going a little bit longer. I know there's a couple of questions and things, and I actually want to pick Mitch's brain on maybe trying to get some secrets out of him of what's coming in the future. So I think, Mitch, the transmission thing we were talking about. Remember we were talking earlier about mixing filaments and how Huge Forge is doing that. I think that seems to be along the lines where they're talking about like how far light goes through it, diffusion of light through filament, that type of stuff. Are those things you're looking at measuring in the future as the industry grows and multicolor grows?
Yes, I get what you're saying. So there was one project that I worked on that was really important to have the right translucency and transparency that was involved with it. It was a color that was supposed to be an extremely light. It was actually a few different colors, but I'll use green as an example. A really, really light green to the point where when you hold up a strand of that green of filament, it looks transparent. But when you actually print something, and it gets thick enough, then you can actually start to see the green that's in it. I don't know if you've ever looked at like a pane of glass or something from the side, and you can see that like a pane of glass is actually green or something or blue. But when you look straight on, it's just completely transparent. We didn't really have a way to measure that.
Okay.
It was mostly just because it didn't matter per se. A lot of the stuff that we do is driven by demand. So that's where I get shut down on something. So like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I want to be able to measure how transparent something is. I want to be able to do that. And then kind of the more business oriented guy will be like, how is that going to affect sales? Like if we start putting that on a product, does that do anything for us? And if there's one or two people out there that care about it, then it might not be worth the R&D time for it. So pretty much anything like, I mean, we are constantly going to events like ERRF and MRF to see what people want as well. So there's a lot of that where somebody's out there. HueForge is an excellent example. At MRF, that was kind of the first time I heard about them. And that was being able to see, hey, this is what somebody's doing. This is cool. And then I turn around and say, like, what could I potentially do to make that even cooler? Another good example is the Voron crew. So the first time I ever was exposed to a Voron printer, they were going with insane speeds. And fast printing wasn't a thing in my life until I really got into Vorons. And then I kind of came back and I was like, can I make filament that will print faster than normal filament? Is that a thing? So going to those events like ERRF and MRF are kind of my chance to see what people really want, what they're doing with it, and then take that back to the drawing board here and see whether or not a new filament concoction can actually influence that.
All right. Well, it looks like Ajax is saying that he's developing a tester for that. Now, you said something that kind of I started thinking about. You're treating translucency and transparency as two different things. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay. I'm getting a little out of my expertise here, but the way I use them, this might be wrong.
Okay.
Translucency is how much light will shine through something. So for example, you might have frosted glass. If you have a frosted glass window, light will shine into your house, but you can't see through it. So transparency is how much you can see through it and see what's on the other side, whereas translucency is how much light actually allows to come through, even if it's dispersed and you can't truly see through it.
Okay. I gotcha. All right. Well, cool. And I think that's most of the questions. We've got a lot of HueForge things, but I think we've talked about that. And guys, thank y'all for joining us tonight. I think this has been a lot of fun. Now, here's where I'm going to so what can you tell us? What are you working on? What's in the lab? Like, what's your mad scientist
everybody,
doing right
now? Like the stream. And also, if you want Mitch to come back, I want Mitch to come back. Because Mitch, you are just a font of knowledge. And poor Mitch, every time I hang out with Mitch, I corner him and ask him questions about filament. I do. It's true. But the thing is, Mitch, you don't seem to be overly upset about that.
No one asks me stuff like this. I mean, I go home and I just tell people I melt plastic for a living, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds cool," and then that's it. So no one cares.
I love this. And so if you all are interested in this kind of, I mean, maybe it's just the three of us, but I love knowing about how the filament's made, because in this case we have a spool that's cardboard and we have those pellets, and all they've done is they've been extruded into 1.75 millimeter. But the vast majority of filament is not this. And how do you go from the resin, which we now know are the little pellets, to something that's beautiful and green and Dr. Pepper colored? And I'm excited about your next Dr. Pepper colored.
I know, right? which brings us back to the mad scientist hat. What have you get? What can
Yeah,
you tell us about?
what's in the pipeline?
So the newest things, I mean, aren't that groundbreaking, but the things that I've been spending time on is 5 kilogram rolls right now, because a lot of people want a lot of filament. So just had the first 5 kilogram roll run off the line on Friday, and I was doing 5 kilogram rolls right before I jumped on this stream, which opens up neat winding, making sure that I can get neat winding working on a 5 kilogram roll as well. So it's just a lot of like kind of designing and 3D printing different jigs, or going to the CNC and milling out some parts that we need to upgrade the line to support that stuff. So there's two things about sizes of spool. I have one project where I'm trying to make them as big as possible, and then another one is where I'm trying to make them way smaller and still be like affordable. So like 200 or 250 gram spools for the people that want like 50 different colors but don't want to spend like $1,000 on full kilogram rolls. So
They want to stand. I mean, 200 grams is a sample to me, because
50 grams is usually what the sample is.
You can do a decent sized print, but you can't do a big print.
Yeah.
So no colors you can give us a hint at, or a type of advanced architecture PLA, or
the only reason that I avoid saying what I'm working on is not because it's necessarily a secret, but because I'd say 9 out of 10 ideas that I have end up failing. So I just try all sorts of things. I've got a new project coming up. I mean, one of the reasons is the pigments that are coming up right now. This is a early pigment experimentation that we're about to try, and I don't know if it's going to fail. So like, I don't want to be like, hey, we've got some new potential color techniques for manufacturing it coming out, because if it fails, I'm never going to talk about it ever again. I'll pretend it never happened. So I deal with a lot of disasters, and every once in a while out of the disasters comes a beautiful like invention or something new. So I don't know. I've probably got 10 different things coming on that.
Well, that is totally fair, and a very good answer. I think everybody can.
What's one of the ones that turned out to be a beautiful result?
Let's see. All right, so this will answer one of the questions I said I probably might or might not talk about. One example was how I first discovered how silk works, silk filaments. This had to do with when we were first starting to make PETG for the first time, and we noticed that when we were running a transition from one spool to another, we could transition from PLA to ABS, no problem. Transitioning from PETG to PLA, though, was a little bit different, and I don't know if they're not like compatible plastics or whatnot. But the way that they cool down ends up taking one strand of one material and it stretches it out on the inside of another one and ends up making it look very silky. So the kind of like shiny part that you're seeing is actually a different plastic on the inside that has different cooling factors, and it's causing it to kind of have that shine. So like mixing them together gives it this like almost pearlescent feel. So those aren't the only two colors or two materials that you can do that with. You can do it with like TPUs, you can do it with PLA, PETG, and stuff like that, just kind of like combining the two. So shortly after that, after I discovered, hey, I've got this really cool, shiny, silky material, then I was trying to experiment. I'm like, what happens if I transition from this material to this material? What about this one to this one? What about this one to this one? So I was trying like everything that I could possibly get my hands on to see if some weird new thing would pop up. I still didn't decide that I wanted to get into silks, because there's a lot of silks that are already out there, and it just never, it's one of those things that I've got like on the back burner. Like one of these days I know how to make it now, so I can pull the trigger on it and try it out. But I do like to do a lot of material testing before I send it out the door. And since that one's kind of like a hybrid between two different materials, it's probably going to print a little bit different. Like I know a lot of people that print with silks already talk that silks print different than regular PLA, and some people don't know why. Some people say that it's because there's TPU in it and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit scared of the support side of that and trying to figure out how I want to handle that, figuring out what ratio is good for printability, but also for the wow factor of the final print. So maybe it's harder to print in the end, but it looks beautiful. And now I have to decide how much emphasis I want to put on one versus the other. So that's why it's still like in the back burner for me, though.
This is all really exciting to me. I don't know about you guys. I'm so you're over here. I don't know about you all.
No, and that is all awesome, and we could probably go on for another couple of hours and stuff talking about it. But we probably picked your brain a lot already, and we're definitely get some people who want you to come back, and I know we want you to come back. So we will get you back sometime. So guys, I want to thank y'all for being here tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Courtney, always love spending time with you. Mitch, it's great to see you. I hate we're not going to see you at ERRF this time.
I know.
But I know we will see you in the future at some different places. And we always have fun when we get together. So guys, look, hit the like button, hit the bells, do all the things that you need to do to make sure that you see us the next time. It's good to see all of y'all. Thank you for the questions. Fourth Sunday night of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern is when we do this. If you have questions that we don't answer here, feel free to reach out to us on any of the socials. Asylum Life Makes, Filament Stories, and Polar Filaments. I'm sure all of us check our social media and just make sure that we answer the things that come in. So thank you again for tonight. Courtney, you want to say anything else?
No, Mitch, thank you very much. And thank you guys for the questions. And for liking my shirt. I love my shirt. Yay. And Clockspring designed it. He's the man. He actually is in the US now. And Mitch, we're going to see you at the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I don't talk about this stuff as much as I want.
I love it. No, I could ask you questions all night, as is evidence. So, all right. Thank you all for bearing with us as I sidetracked this 28 times.
It's all good. Thank you guys. And y'all have a great night. Courtney, hit that button.